Yep.
Shabbos test base.
Shabbos test base. Okay. From where is it derived that the ship is ritually pure, in the sense that it cannot become impure? As it's stated, the way of a ship is in the midst of the sea. From where is it derived that a garden bed is 6 by 6 handbreadths? The one may plant 5 different types of seeds in it. He may do so without violating the prohibition of sowing a mixture of diverse of kalayim. One sows 4 types of plants on each of the 4 sides of the garden bed and one in the middle. So, oh, I see. Yeah. There's an allusion to this in the text as it's stated, for as the earth brings forth its growth and as a garden causes its seeds to grow, and then it continues, so will Hashem cause justice and praise to spring forth before all the nations. Its seeds in this, its seed in the singular is not stated, rather it's seeds. So apparently it's possible that several seeds may be planted in this in a small garden.
Right. And I'm just actually filling in because my diagram here in the Kahati was kind of incomplete. So I'm penciling in the areas, but basically in that 6 by 6 tvachim, you can get a layout like this. Oops, I'm in blurred mode. Darn. Okay. Now what? Can possibly see it over there. Okay, there you go. Right.
So you got 4 on each side and then in the middle. Okay, cool.
Right, Vanessa, you got Gimel. Good morning, by the way.
I'm sorry?
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
From where do we learn that a woman who emits semen on the 3rd day is tameh? For it is stated, be prepared for 3 days. From where do we learn that we may bathe a circumcised baby on the 3rd day, even if it falls on Shabbos? For it is stated, and it came to pass on the 3rd day when they were in pain. From where do we learn that a strip of red wood is tied to the head of the goat that is sent out? For it is stated, if your sins will be like crimson, they will become white as snow.
Okay. From where is it derived that smearing oil on one's body is like drinking and is similarly prohibited on Yom Kippur? Although there's no proof, there is an allusion, as it's stated, and it comes into his inward parts like water and like oil into his bones. So seems to be equating drinking water and soaking up oil through your skin.
Yep. Okay. Now Mishna Hay returns to our main subject matter, which is the shiurim of how much of each thing it takes to be chayav for carrying in the Rishus Harabim. Hamotzi eitzim, taking out wood, kedei levashel beit zakala, enough to cook a lightly boiled egg. Remember, we saw that shiur before when we were talking about reeds.
Mm-hmm.
We said, in like the initial measure we said of a reed was if you could make a quill out of it, but if it's too coarse, too big to make a quill out of it, then the shiur reverts to firewood, which is what we're looking at over here. Okay. Tavlin, spices, kedei letabel beit zakala, enough spices to spice a lightly boiled egg. I'm not sure if a lightly boiled egg needs more or less spices than a hard boiled egg. Anyway, and different types of spices do join with each other to make up that shiur because they all have the same shiur of enough for a boiled egg.
It does say here, Cheryl, I'm sorry, it does say in the next one it says enough to season an easily seasoned egg. It says just as a hen's egg is the easiest egg to cook, it is likewise the most palatable of all eggs and thus requires least amount of seasoning.
Okay. It's true. I'm happy to eat a boiled egg without any seasoning at all. So that's okay. Klipe egozim. So the shells of nuts, kliperim, shells of pomegranates, istis upua. whatever these species are, they're things that you can make dye out of them, and it's enough to make a dye katana bisvacha, enough to dye a very small garment. Now, what's the bisvacha? It's part of the weave of a woman's tichel, which it's basically it's a small portion of her headdress, and enough to make a dye that will dye that. That's considered chashav on Shabbos. May raglayim neseru boris komunia va'eshlag. So urine, natron, boris is I think elam, and komunia and eshlag. Eshlag is that potassium? I can't. Whatever it is, all of these subject, all of these things, whatever their translation is, they're all detergents.
It says
And we know that they're detergents because in Maseches Nida, when you're inspecting the cloth of a Nida, or if there's a concern that something might be paint or it might be blood, then you take I think there were seven different detergents that you have to do it in order, and if it stays after you've run them past all these detergents, then it's dye.
we had that seven. We had those seven in the Mishnah somewhere. I forget.
Right, that was in a Mishnah. I think it was in Maseches Nida.
It says an eshlag is a kind of mineral substance used for cleaning, found in the cavities of pearls, and is removed with an iron nail.
Yeah. Okay, so all of these substances, these detergents over here, enough to launder that same beged katan that we just spoke about with dye. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda he says no. We see these detergents mentioned in connection with nida, and the shear is enough to launder a spot that's from a suspected nida to see if it's blood or if it's dye. Okay. Halacha does not follow Rabbi Yehuda, follows the Tanna Kama. Mishna Vav, Pilpelis is pepper. Kol shehi, any amount. Now, what is the practice with pepper? Was that people would use it as a breath freshener. So you'd stick a peppercorn or whatever it was in your mouth, and that would keep your breath fresh for the day. So if you carry out even the smallest amount of pepper, that's going to be chayav because it's chashav enough that a person would stick it in their mouth. The itran kol shehu. Also, itran is the waste of pitch, and it's a small amount. Why? Because it's good for a refuah for somebody who's got who's got a headache. Yeah, it's good. It's used as a refuah for someone who's got a headache. Okay. Minei besamim and minei matzechos kol shehen. All types of fragrant spices and perfumes, in other words, and matzechos, even metal kol shehen. Interesting that I understand the fragrant spices because even a small amount you can smell and it's enjoyable. The metals, Kahati explains that this is because you can make a kli out of a small kli out of any amount of metal. Although you got to say that there's got to be a minimum shear over here because like what are you going to do with a little dot of metal? There's got to be some chashivas to it. Me'avnei hamizbech me'afar hamizbech mekek svarim mekek mitbechosehem kol shehen. So all of these things are also in the shear of any amount. What's it? Avnei hamizbech, from the stones that come from the mizbech, or from the dust that's on the mizbech, or from mekek svarim, the worn out remains of scrolls and their wrappings. Any amount. Why? Shen matzniin osan legonzan. Because if you have these things, then you typically keep them to put them into geniza. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, af hamoti mi mishamshe avodah zara kol shehu shenema v'lo yidbak biyadcha me'uma min acherim. So he says that not only that, but even if you have things of avodah zara, if you carried avodah zarah into the Rishus Harabim, that would also be, you'd also be chayav of that, because me'uma min acherim, he says you should not allow any of that to stick to your hand. Now he's talking about carrying into the street, which is not the same as the issur of keeping avodah zarah. But if a person carried avodah zarah into the street, he's saying any amount. Why? Because it's got enough of the chashivas that Hashem said in the Torah. You're not allowed to allow it to take even the smallest amount of avodah zarah. So if it's small enough that to ask you to take it to have the avodah zarah, then it's also small enough to make you chayav for carrying it. Okay, halacha does not follow Rabbi Yehuda. As a matter of fact, I think there's no issur, at least even with a large avodah zarah, even if he's like lugging a great big statue of some avodah zarah into the street, he's pater on it. Since nobody would keep it, the basic rule is that it's not something that people keep because it's asked to keep it, and people don't keep them. It's we're good from Jews, and people have no interest in keeping avodah zarah. So even if somebody carried a whole big avodah zarah into the street, he's pater. Okay. Mishna Zayin. Ha motzi kupas harochin. Now, kupas harochin, you've got a box, and it's got a whole bunch of little jars of perfume inside it. Now, if somebody takes that box and carries it into Rishus Harabim, is he chayav for the box, or is he chayav for each little jar of perfume? Because each individual item might make him chayav in a separate korban chatas. The answer is no. It's afal pi sheyesh ba'minim harbe eino chayav elechatas achas. He only has to bring one chatas. Now, the explanation over here is because the kuppah joins them all into one hotzah. But I want somebody to ask me a kasha over here. If you go back to Perek Zayin Mishnah Aleph, Bal Gadol. Near the last bit of the Mishnah, Ha'ose melachos harbe me'ein melacha achas eno chayev ele chatas achas. If you do lots of melachas, all from the same av melacha, in one helem, you only bring one chatas. So why would I have thought that taking out multiple jars of perfume would have made you chayav more than one chatas? It's all the same melacha. And that I honestly don't know. Does the commentary in Art Scroll tell us anything interesting about why we would have had such a havamina? Because Kahati just sort of glosses over it. He gives it a reason, but to me it's the wrong reason. It should have said because it's Mayan Melacha Achas, not because the box joins them all.
This is liable for but one sin offering, and this is regarded as but one transfer. That makes sense?
Yeah, but that leaves my question open.
I know. It says C 10.2. Oh, let's see 10.2.
10.2. Okay, well, there's another one. That's right. I remember there was another one that's similar. 10.2 is Hamotzi Ochin Unasalan Ala Iskopa. Ben Shechazavotian Ben Shehotzian Acher Patur Mishlasa Malachtu Basachas Kupashi Malea Peros. So he has another box that's full of peros. Unasana Ala Iskopa Chitzana, and he puts it in the outer step. Al Pisharova Peros Mi Bachut Patur Achi Yotzias Kola Kupa. But that's he's only chayav if he takes it out in one movement. No, that's not talking about the number of times it's going to be chayav. It's just no. That still doesn't answer it. Okay, we have a tzarich iyun over here. I'm going to have to turn to the KSY virtual base midrash to find out an answer for this one.
It says here something about the Rambam on Shabbos interprets this as meaning that all the various units contained in a vessel are considered as if legally bound together by that vessel and are therefore viewed by the law as one unit. Accordingly, unless the basket has been removed entirely from its original domain, even the individual units contained within that basket, since they are bound together by the basket, are viewed by the halakha as being still partially in the original domain. This, despite the fact that several of these units may be physically be entirely removed from the original domain. The Rambam rules in accordance with this latter view. Rav, however, explains the Mishnah according to the former. I don't know if that helps at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's reinforcing the point that we've already said, that we're saying that the boxes bound them all into one masoi, and therefore you would only be chayav once for carrying them out. But I'm still saying that that according to Mishnah Zayin, Perek Zayin Mishnah Aleph, it doesn't matter. Even if you'd taken even if there hadn't been a box, and you'd taken them all out, you should only be chayav once, unless you were reminded in between each one. But then how would you be reminded in between each one when it came to the box? You're taking the box out.
Yeah.
So I just don't understand how there would be a havamina that you'd be chayav more than once. Unless we can define this down to where the guy is carrying a box, and as he takes out the first bit, somebody says to him, "Hey, you're doing hotzah." He says, "Oh, am I? Whoops." And then he stops, and then he says, "Oh well, let me just start taking this on this." And someone says, "No, you're doing hotzah." And he says, "Oh, am I? Whoa!" And then each time, if he was carrying things individually, then he would be chayav on each one, because he's had a warning in between each one. He's had a reminder that this is hotzah on Shabbos, and now he's forgotten again. So each helem he'd be chayav on for a separate chatas. Whereas if it was the box, then you say, okay, it's all joined together in one thing. He can only be chayav once. Maybe that's how we're going to define it down. Okay. Right. So it's saying motzi kupas arochin afapi sheyesh ba minin habe eno chayav ela chatas achas zera negina. Now, garden seeds. Tachlos mikrogeris. So garden seeds, even less than a grogeris. Now the grogeris that's the shear for edible food. So if you take edible food less than a grogeris out, your pater. But garden seeds, you say even less than a grogeris. Why? Because they're significant, because you're going to take them and plant them in the garden. You don't need a grogeris in order to plant them in the garden. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beser Omer Chamisha. He says you just need 5 seeds, and that's enough to make it significant. Zera kishuin shnaim. If it's for cucumbers, I think is kishuin. That's you only need 2 of them. Zera deloim shnaim, also for gourds, it's only 2 seeds. Zera polamitri shnaim, and for Egyptian beans also 2. Chagav chai tahor. If you have a living locust of a kosher species, kol shehu, as big as it is, and no matter how small it is, you're chayav for carrying that out, because people give that to their kids to play with. Why will they give them to the kids to play with? Why specifically the kosher ones? Because the parent will say, okay, so if it dies, or if the kid crushes it by mistake, and the worst comes to worst, he puts it in his mouth. Okay, so it's kosher. It's fine. You don't have to worry about it. Okay, which is why, as opposed to a tamei locust, which we'll see later in the Mishnah, but the tamei locust, the parents won't give to their children to play with. Okay, if it's dead, however, if the locust is already dead, then it's already become a foodstuff. It's no longer a plaything, and therefore it's the shear is gregarious like any other food. Tziporis kramim. This Tziporis kramim is a species which there's some speculation about what it is, that it's either a kind of a bird or it's a kind of a locust. Ben chaya ben meisa, whether it's living or dead, kol shehu, any amount of size, matznin or salary refuah, because it's used as a refuah. So any amount is usable as a refuah, and therefore it's you'd be chayav for that. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, af amotzi chagav chai tamei. He says all this that people are fussy about, giving locusts to their kids to play with, and only kosher ones. Yes, it's not. So it'll be. So he says even the chagav chaytama, even if the locust is of an unkosher species, you're Rabbi Yehuda is choshesh for it that people give it to their kids to play with, because adults don't have to worry about what children eat. So when it comes to chinuch, you have to worry about your own children, and the Beis Din has to worry about children if there are no adults in the room. But if I see some random kid in the street about to eat an ant, I don't have to. It's not my chiyuv to go and tell them to stop. There's no chiyuv to stop them. Only if it's my kid and I've got a mitzvah of chinuch on my kid, then I need to stop them. So says Rabbi Yehuda, if this is the case, then even the non-kosher locusts, somebody will say to the kids in the street, yeah, here's a locust for you to play with. Just move away from my window.
I thought we had an obligation, at any time to help a child in chinuch.
That's lifnei mishra sadin. It's not an obligation of any sort. Once I've seen kids who of my children of my friends and going and sort of pulling the leaves off a tree on Shabbos, and I've gone up to them nicely and said, but that's because I know them and I know their parents and they've got a relationship. But when I see other kids from the street, jumping onto the trees on Shabbos, I should be telling them, their parents should be telling them, don't climb trees on Shabbos. You're not allowed to climb trees on Shabbos.
No, you're right.
But
I wouldn't do that either. For someone
for me, it's not. For me, it's not. I don't have a chiyuv to tell them. They're under bar mitzvah. If they were over bar mitzvah, then you've got a chiyuv because you've got a Kol Yisrael Arevim Zevazeh. You've got to if you can, you've got to give tochacha in the nicest possible way.
If it was someone that I didn't know, under bar mitzvah, I wouldn't get involved in that because
exactly because you don't have a chiyuv.
Friend of my kids or something, that's a different story.
Right. So that's a lifnei mishra sadin.
I waited for the kid to come over to me and tell me they're not supposed to do that. So, which I've had.
Okay.
Which I've had.
Yeah.
Many years ago, we were about to bench, and I sat in a different seat. And my youngest granddaughter in Silver Spring, in Maryland, came over and said, "Zadie, you have to sit in the same seat where you ate. You should be sitting in that same seat." So.
Did you tell her she was wrong?
Yeah. She tells me what to do, so When she comes to seminary next year, we'll see. This year she's coming, so here's the seminary.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, Vav base.
Oh wait, I have to put this over here. Okay, let me put this over here. Okay.
Okay. A man may not go out on Shabbos with a spiked sandal, and he may not go out with a single sandal when there is no wound on his foot. And he may neither go out with tefillin nor with an amulet when it is not from an expert, but rather when it was written by someone who is not without an established reputation for making effective amulets. And he may neither go out with shirion nor with a kasta, nor with magafayim. So these are his different armor things, his helmet, his, I don't know.
Greaves.
And his chainmail or something?
Yeah, the shirion is his chainmail, yeah.
Helmet and greaves. And if he went out into the public domain with any of these, he's not liable to bring a chatas.
So a woman may not go out with a needle that has an eye, nor with a signet ring, nor with a cocoa-shaped head ring, nor with a spice bundle, nor with a perfume flask. And if she went out, she is liable for a chatas. These are the words of Reb Meir, but the Chachamim exempt her in the case of a spice bundle or a perfume flask.
Okay. A man may neither go out with a sword or with a bow or with a shield or with an Allah, nor with a spear. I assume an Allah is some other sort of weapon. Okay, mace. And if he accidentally went out with any of these weapons to the public domain, he's liable to bring a chatas. Rabbi Eliezer says these weapons are ornaments for him. Just as a man is permitted to go out into the public domain with other ornaments, he can go out with weapons. Rabbis say they are nothing other than reprehensible, as in the future they will be eliminated as it's written, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nations will not rise sword against nation, neither will they learn war anymore. So these are not ornaments, these are unfortunate things of reality, which hopefully will be gone soon. With regard to women's ornaments, they add that a garter placed on her leg to hold up stockings is pure and cannot become ritually impure as a utensil, and she may even go out with it on Shabbos. However, ankle chains, which are ornaments, can become ritually impure, and she may not go out with them on Shabbos.
Orla.
Sorry?
Orla Beis Zayin.
Orla, right. Okay. Orla Beis Zayin. Stringently and leniently if they are of different kinds. How so? If, for instance, crushed beans have been cooked with lentils and they impart a flavor, whether they are outweighed by 100 to 1 or they are not outweighed by 100 to 1, it is forbidden. If they do not impart a flavor, whether they are outweighed by 100 to 1 or they are not outweighed by 100 to 1, it's permitted.
Okay. If leaven of hulin has fallen into dough, and there was enough of it to cause fermentation, and after that leaven of truma fell in, or leaven of kilaim, karim, and there's enough to cause fermentation, the dough is aser.
If leaven of chulin fell into dough and leavened it, and then leaven of truma or leaven of karim fell into it, it suffices to leaven it. It is forbidden. Bim Shimon permits.
Shavis Ches Yud Aleph.
If a bath has been heated with 70 straw or stubble, one is permitted to wash in it. If he is a distinguished person, he may not wash in it.
Okay. Rue, goosefoot, purslane, hill coriander, celery, and meadowberries are exempt from tithes, and they may be purchased from anyone during the sabbatical year, since such produce is not usually stored. Rabbi Yehuda says aftergrowths of mustard are permitted, since transgressors are not suspected concerning them. Rabbi Shimon says all aftergrowths are permitted, with the exception of the aftergrowths of cabbage, since they cannot be placed within the category of field vegetables. But the sages say all aftergrowth are forbidden. I'm not sure what we're talking about aftergrowth here.
That
After
means
you pick it?
So sfichim are things that sprouted after Rosh Hashanah.
Oh, okay.
So the reason that now min haTorah, things that grow by themselves are permitted. You're allowed to pick fruit of trees. You're allowed to and in the same way, if you have some onions that I mean, this actually happened in my onion in my garden with some onions. What are they called? The scallions. Just spontaneously popped up from my freshly laid grass. I laid my grass just before Shemitah, and during the Shemitah, the scallions suddenly popped up in my grass. So min haTorah, I would have been permitted to eat those scallions, and they would have had Kiddush Shvius, but Chazal made a blanket Isser on anything that sprouted after Rosh Hashanah because of Avera who were planting things and then saying, "Oh, they just grew by themselves."
Oh, yeah.
So there's no chashash obviously for trees with that, but when it came to annual crops, they said anything that sprouted after Rosh Hashanah is aser.
Okay, cool.
There are 3 countries in regard to beer: Judea, Transjordan, and the Galilee, and each is divided into 3 regions: the Upper Galilee, the Lower Galilee, and the valley from Kephar Hanania upward, where no sycamores grow. Is Upper Galilee from Kephar Hanania downward, where sycamores grow? Is Lower Galilee, and the region of Tiberias is the valley, and in Judea the mountain, the plain, and the valley. And the plain of Lydia is like the plain of the south, and its mountain is like the king's mountain range. From Beit Haron unto the sea is one region.
Taros Gimel.
Regarding one contaminated with corpse tuma who squeezed olives or grapes, if the olives or grapes consist of exactly a beit volume, the extracted liquid is tahor, provided that it does not touch the place of the liquid. If the grapes or olive consists of more than beta avayim, that's what, yeah, the beta the juice is tamei. Since as soon as the first drop emerges, it is rendered tamei by the eggs volume of food. Sorry, that's wrong. It is rendered tamei by an egg's volume. Volume is tahor. If the mass consists of more than an egg's volume of olives, the oven is tamei. For as soon as the first drop of oil emerges, it's rendered tamei by an egg's volume of food. If the olives were separate, even if they consist of asar, the oven is tahor. Regarding a mass of of olives which fell into an oven, and the oven was kindled, if the mass consists of exactly an egg's volume of olives, the oven is.
Hold on, just a second. Did you turn the page the right way here?
Well, probably not. Is that important? Okay. I'm going back. One thing. The juice of an egg is tamei, since as soon as the first drop emerges, it is rendered tamei by an egg's volume of food. If he was a zav or a zava, even if he squeezed only a single fruit, the liquid is tamei. For as soon as the first drop emerges, it is rendered tamei through being carried by the zava. Regarding a zav who milked a goat, the milk is tamei. For as soon as the first drop emerges, it is rendered tamei through being carried by the zav.
Okay. If an egg's bulk of food was left in the sun and it was lessened, so this thing shrinks in the heat by being dried out. And so also in the case of an olive's bulk of a corpse, an olive's bulk of Karen, a lentil's bulk of a sheretz, an olive's bulk of pigul, an olive's bulk of nosar, and an olive's bulk of forbidden fats, they become clean. Nor is one liable on account of these for transgressing the law of pigul, nosar, or forbidden fats. If they were left out in the rain and they swelled, they become unclean, and guilt is incurred on account of them for transgressing the law of pigul, nosar, and forbidden fats.
I see that your version has got the corrected version of the Mishnah, because there's some dispute in the Girsa of the Mishnah, which I've penciled in. I've penciled in. I've crossed out what was written in my Mishnah and penciled in what should be, and your translation has it exactly right. Yeah.
Are you about the chalev?
Yeah, about the chalev. The first one turns tamei into chalev, and the second one just deletes the tamei altogether, because it just doesn't make sense, because that's exactly the subject you're saying. This is dafka. This is something about tamei, and you're chayav for pigul, nosar, and chalev. Why mention tamei again?
Right. All right. All uncertainties of tuma are decided according to their status at the time of the discovery. If they are found in a tamei state, they are assumed to have been tamei, and if they are found in a tahor state, they are assumed to have been tahor. If they are found covered, they are assumed to have been covered, and if they are found uncovered, they are assumed to have been uncovered. If a needle was found, a needle was full of rust or broken, it is tahor. For all uncertainties of tuma are decided according to the status at the time of their discovery.
Right. So we see what's the status now, and we presume it always was that way until the previous time it was known to be anything else.
Okay. Menachos
Gimel Dalet.
It is a reminder. If its remainder became tamei, burnt or lost, according to the rule of Rebbe Eliezer, it is valid. But according to the rule of Rebbe Shua, it is invalid. If it was not placed in a sacred vessel, it is invalid. Reb Shimon validates it. If it is burnt, its kummetz twice, it is valid.
Sorry, which Mishnah are we on?
We're in Gimel Hay.
Gimel Hay. Okay, good. With regard to a handful, failure to sacrifice the minority of it prevents the majority of it, which was sacrificed, from rendering it permitted for the priests to consume the remainder of the meal offering. With regard to a tenth of an ephah of flour brought as a meal offering, failure to sacrifice the minority of it prevents the majority of it, which was sacrificed, from qualifying as a proper meal offering. With regard to wine poured as a libation, failure to pour the minority of it prevents the majority of it, which was poured, from qualifying as proper libation. So if we have majorities and minorities here, if we're like, I don't understand. They're
No,
split.
so if the entire comet has to go into the mizbeach, even if you leave off a small amount, it's invalid.
Okay, so you
So-
pour
so-
most of it, and you're like,
So you
it's
might have
good
thought
enough.
that you might have thought, okay, the majority went on, it's all okay, and this mission is telling you no. It's
Okay.
even the minority prevents the majority.
Okay. So with regard to the log of oil that is required for the meal offering, failure to add the minority of it prevents the majority, which was added from being a sufficient measure of oil. With regard to the fine flour and the oil, failure to bring each prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the other. You need to bring them both. With regard to the handful of frankincense, failure to burn each prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the other.
The two he-goats of Yom Kippur are essential to the validity of each other. The two lambs of Shavuos are essential to the validity of each other. The two loaves are essential to the validity of each other. And the two arrangements are essential to the validity of each other. The two spoonfuls of frankincense are essential to the validity of each other. And the arrangements and the spoonfuls of frankincense are essential to the validity of each other. The two kinds of breads of the Nazir, of the three ingredients added to the red cow, and the four kinds of bread of the Torah offering, the four species of the lulav, and the four ingredients of the mitzvah's purification are essential to the validity of each other. The seven sprinklings of the red cow are essential to the validity of one another, and the seven sprinklings between the poles and on the curtain and on the golden altar are essential to the validity of one another.
Okay. And Nadarim tests.
One who makes a neder prohibiting wine is permitted apple wine. If he prohibited oil, he's permitted sesame oil. If honey, he's permitted date honey. If vinegar, he is permitted a vinegar of winter grapes. If leek, he's permitted leeks with a head. If vegetables, he's permitted with wild vegetables because it is I can't get the word out. I can't get it out.
Appellation.
Oh yeah, I have a different word. Okay.
What have you got?
Appellative.
Appellative, yeah. So the Shem Levi means that there's another adjective that's added to the original noun, which removes it from the category as far as Nadarim is concerned.
I'm surprised about the date honey. I could be wrong about this, but I think the Torah, when it refers to Dvash, it's referring to date honey.
That we're in Eretz Zavas Chalav Dvash.
Right. So here are you saying?
So that might have been talking about date honey, but nonetheless, when a person Nadarim is not talking about the Torah, the Lashon of Torah, it's talking about Lashon of Bnei Adam. And that's actually a very important distinction to have in mind, is that when people make Nadarim, and that, like this whole Masechta is talking about Lashon Bnei Adam, because what was his intention when he made this neder? If somebody's talking about honey, they're talking about bee honey. They're not talking about date honey.
However,
Even if Eretz Zavas Chalav Dvash is referring to date honey, that's immaterial. It's what do people mean when they say it?
What if he says date honey?
Okay, then he's asked to date honey.
Honey, but he could have regular bee honey.
Yes.
Right. Okay. All right.
Okay. Sure, in the right place. Good. One who vows that cabbage is forbidden to him is prohibited from eating asparagus.
Yeah, that's what it says, asparagus. But I don't think it's actually asparagus.
Asparagus. Which is a type of cabbage, not asparagus.
You really want to call it asparagus, but it's not asparagus if there's a confusion with cabbage.
Right. Or we've got bigger problems. However, one who vows that asparagus, a type of cabbage, is forbidden to him is permitted to eat cabbage. So
asparagus is
they're
under
different.
the category. So it's under the category of cabbage, but if you're saying asparagus, then that's only asparagus. It doesn't answer the broader category. So when you ask yourself the broad category, then whatever's contained in that is answer. But if he asks on himself just the smaller category, then what's outside it is mutter.
So it'd be like romaine lettuce versus just lettuce in general.
Exactly.
One who vows that pounded beans are forbidden to him is prohibited from eating pounded bean stew, mikvah. However, Rabbi Yossi rules that he's permitted to eat it. One who vows that pounded beans are forbidden to him is prohibited from eating pounded bean stew.
Is
Didn't we just say that?
mutter
Oh, is
mutter begrisim, no?
one who vows that pounded beans are forbidden is prohibited from eating the bean stew. Rabbi Yossi says it's okay. One who vows that pounded beans are forbidden to him is prohibited from eating pounded bean stew.
Really? You've got answer.
That doesn't make any sense.
No, I think it's the well, my gears of the Mishnah says mutar, not aser.
Mine also says if grits pottage he is permitted grits.
Yeah.
If grits pottage he is also.
I think it's probably mistaken Sfaria then.
Oh yeah, I think it got copy and pasted. It's because it's literally the same line over again. Okay. So mine just says that twice. So Rabbi Yossi says it's okay. One who vows that pounded bean stew is forbidden to him is permitted to eat pounded beans according to all opinions. One who vows that stew is forbidden to him is prohibited from eating the garlic of the stew. However, Yossi rules that he's permitted to eat the garlic. One who vows that garlic is forbidden to him is permitted to eat stew. One who vows that lentils are forbidden to him is prohibited from eating shishim, a dish made from lentils. However, Rabbi Yossi permits it. It's agreed by all that one who vowed that shishim is forbidden, this lentil dish, he's permitted to eat just lentils. If one says hita, wheat in singular form, or hitim, wheat in plural form, are konam for me, and for that reason I will not taste them, he is prohibited from eating wheat, whether as flour or bread. If he says wheat or wheat is in plural, doesn't matter.
Is the Hebrew, yeah.
If one says pounded beans or pounded bean one or pounded beans are konam for me, and for that reason I will not taste them, he is prohibited from eating them, whether raw or cooked. Rabbi Yehuda, so the plural again doesn't matter. Rabbi Yehuda says if one said pounded bean or hita is konam, so it's singular, and for that reason I will not taste them, he is permitted to chew them raw, as that's not the normal way to eat them, and therefore it was not included in the intention of the vow.
Can we just go back for a second, where it says the sages, however, permit it. Now, part with the grits, I want to see which I'm supposed to cross out. Which is grits?
No, yours is fine. It's a problem in Safaria.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Zion. Okay. Zion Aleph. One who makes a net of prohibiting greens is permitted gourds. Rabbi Akiva, however, forbids them. They said to Rabbi Akiva, doesn't a person say to his agent, buy me greens? And he says, I found only gourds. He said to them, indeed, it is so, but does he say to him, I found only legumes? It is only because bitter gourds are included under the category of greens, but legumes are not included under the category of greens, and he is forbidden fresh Egyptian beans, but permitted dry ones.
Okay. So the argument between Rabbi Akiva and Chachamim is like, how far out of the category are we talking about? So they're saying, so Chachamim is saying, look, if a person would come back for confirmation before buying something that's not in the category, and Rabbi Akiva says yes, but he would ask the question. If it was something completely out of the category, then he wouldn't bother asking the question. So that's the gray area where they have the machlokes. The Chachamim are saying it's got to be mamish in the category in order to aser it. And Rabbi Akiva says, no, if he would have a question about maybe it's in the category, then he'd also have to aser it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Quick Shemitah question.
A quick Shemitah question is it?
Okay. Havdalah.